Welcome back, Focus Learners. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we're stepping into the really fascinating world of language, and specifically, we're looking at a classic cross-cultural linguistic trap that catches out so many people learning or just interacting with Portuguese. Have you ever been listening to a foreign language and heard a word that sounds exactly like one you already know, only to realize way later that you completely misunderstood the conversation? Well, we call these false friends or false twins. Today, we're going to untangle two words in Portuguese that sound remarkably similar, but operate in entirely different universes. By the end of this explainer, you'll have a crystal clear framework for telling them apart. Okay, let's dive into this. Are you Esperto or an expert? Now imagine you're sitting in a bustling cafe in Sao Paulo or Lisbon, and someone looks at you and uses one of these words. How would you feel? Would you thank them for praising your natural wit, or would you thank them for acknowledging your years of hard-earned professional study? You see, these two identical-sounding but completely different words create a perfect storm for confusion. One is a native Portuguese word, and the other is a linguistic stowaway borrowed straight from English. So let's unpack the mystery.
Section 1. Decoding Esperto.
So esperto means clever, smart, or resourceful. But you know, what's really interesting about this concept is that it describes an inherent characteristic. Think about natural cleverness. Esperto doesn't mean you spent 8 years in a university library getting a PhD, right? It means you have street smarts. It means you're quick on your feet. If you're stuck in awful bumper-to-bumper city traffic and you suddenly figure out this brilliant maze of back alleys to get home in half the time, you are esperto. It's a naturally occurring trait of resourcefulness. You didn't study traffic flows, you just figured it out on the fly.
Let's look at a real-world scenario to really lock this in. As crianças são espertas e aprendem rápido. In English, that translates perfectly to children are smart and learn quickly. This vivid little mini-scenario perfectly captures that natural trait we just talked about. Think about a toddler figuring out how to bypass the parental lock on an iPad just by watching you type the passcode a single time. They aren't computer scientists. They don't have a degree in cybersecurity. They're just highly observant, wonderfully resourceful, and inherently clever. They are espertas.
Section 2. The borrowed expert.
Now, an expert is a specialist or someone highly knowledgeable about a subject. This word is borrowed directly from English, meaning it carries the exact same conceptual baggage as it does in the English-speaking world. Unlike esperto, which we just established is a natural trait or cleverness, expert strictly denotes deep, specialized, acquired knowledge in a very specific area. You aren't born an expert in quantum physics or corporate tax law. You become one through rigorous training and intense focus.
But here is exactly where the trap is set. Because this is a borrowed word, it gets run through the filter of Portuguese phonetics. Notice how the pronunciation changes. In English, we end the word with a hard, abrupt T sound, expert. But in Portuguese, particularly in Brazilian Portuguese, words rarely end in a hard silent consonant. So a vowel sound naturally gets added to the very end. It becomes experti. Say it out loud with me, experti. Now imagine a native speaker saying that rapidly in the middle of a sentence, esperti. It suddenly sounds incredibly close to esperto. That slight phonetic twist is exactly why these false twins trip up so many learners.
Let's apply this to a professional scenario. Precisamos de experti para resolver esse problema técnico, meaning we need an expert to solve this technical problem. And this brilliantly illustrates how the word is used in a professional, problem-solving context. Imagine your company's server farm just caught fire and the entire network is completely down. You don't need a clever kid who knows a few iPad tricks, no way. You need someone with a decade of specialized IT infrastructure experience. There's a real urgency here that demands a highly specific skill set. You need an expert.
Section 3. Trait versus skill. So, the crucial point is really sharply juxtaposing these two concepts. On one hand, esperto represents a trait. It's your natural intelligence, your cleverness, a quick wit. On the other hand, expert represents a professional skill or deep expertise in a specific area. It's the classic difference between nature and nurture. The first is who you are naturally. The second is what you've worked incredibly hard to become. Visually lock this concept in your mind right now. Trait versus skill. Section 4. Avoiding misunderstandings. Let's see how this builds into a definitive cheat sheet for your real-world interactions. Imagine you're speaking with a highly trained surgeon right after a complex operation, and you want to compliment their incredible knowledge. You need to call them an expert. Because if you accidentally call them esperto, well, you aren't complimenting their years of medical school. You're basically saying, wow, you're a really clever, sneaky guy. It completely changes the tone of the conversation.
Knowing this distinction, recognizing that Esperto is a clever trait and expert is a specialist skill, empowers you to navigate conversations accurately and respectfully. It saves you from those super awkward lost in translation moments.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. Next time you solve a problem, is it because you are Esperto or because you're an expert? I really want you to think about that in your own daily life. When you fix that leaky sink without having to call a plumber, or when you finally nail that massive presentation at work using your specialized degree. Which word truly applies to you in that exact moment? Understanding the nuances of language doesn't just make us better communicators, it helps us understand exactly how we're interacting with the world around us. Keep learning, keep paying attention to those fascinating little linguistic twins, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.